Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. I'm Terrell Eisinger. I'm the Executive Director for the National Organization of State Offices of Rural Health, and I have the pleasure of wishing you happy National Rural Health Day. It's a busy day for rural America, spotlighting all that is positive in the work of small towns and facilities serving the 60 million people who choose to live in rural America. I hope that you're following all the action on Twitter. A couple of things before we get started. First, we want you to know that this session is being recorded, and for that purpose, we've muted all phone lines at the present time. We hope that you'll have questions and comments, and we ask that you please click on the circle at the bottom of the screen with the conversation icon on it, and use the chat box feature. We'll take a few minutes later on in the webinar to unmute you, to allow for your discussion, for your question as time allows. And finally, the recording will be available on the NOSORH website by early next week under the past webinar materials tab. You know, one of the important things that we ask people for the Power of Rural and National Rural Health Day effort is a pledge to partner to improve rural health. There are 4 things we call on rural advocates to do: to communicate, to educate, to collaborate, and to innovate. We think these activities are especially important as we work to ensure national and state policies which are formed by rural stakeholders. The fact is that every day policymakers are making decisions that have day-to-day impact on rural hospitals, clinics, and other community-based organizations. And I believe we really must get good at framing up rural issues and to ensure we do a good job as our leaders in rural health to help policymakers understand these issues. You know, in my opinion, we educate ourselves by having conversations and working together. So today I'm very happy to have this talk with you and with Andrew Coates. Andrew serves as a counsel in Hall Render's federal legislative and regulatory advocacy practice area. He's based out of Washington, D.C. He brings a decade of legislative and legal experience to his work, having worked in the Bush administration and on Capitol Hill. He now serves as the legislative liaison as part of his role for the National Organization of State Offices of Rural Health. And I really have to add that he is one person that I count on to take a common sense approach to understanding the important work that we all must do in our state legislatures and especially on the Hill in D.C. So Andrew, thanks for joining us today. We appreciate your sharing your thoughts on these key questions. Beth, next slide, please. So we're going to take a look at what we think frames up and helps inform people about the power of rural. And Andrew, I'm just going to start by asking you personally, when you think about the power of rural, what comes to your mind?
Yeah, thanks, Terrell. Appreciate the nice introduction. Happy Rural Health Day to everybody out there. It's a good question, and I know we use the Power of Rural hashtag, and we've seen members tweet about that and include it in press releases and speeches. But really what comes to my mind, and because part of my job is obviously advocating for NOSORH up on the Hill and for rural healthcare up on the Hill, but it's just the response that we've seen from members, particularly over the last couple of years, to rural healthcare issues. You know, I think organizations are kind of only as powerful as their grassroots and their constituency. And you think of the big, powerful organizations in D.C. are the ones that get thrown around a lot, AARP, NRA, and it's really not because they have, you know, necessarily the biggest offices or they raise the most money, but it's because their constituents get out and vote, their voice is heard. And I think that's really the case with rural healthcare and the power of rural. Members are now aware that the constituents will get out and vote on rural issues and issues impacting rural Americans. And we've seen that. I know when we go up to the Hill, Terrell, just the response that we get from both staff and members, I don't think it's necessarily typical with all groups. It's a very responsive Congress to rural healthcare issues, and it continues to trend that way. So in my mind, you know, the power of rural is just that response that Congress gives to rural healthcare issues.
Yeah, I love that, and I love how many times we've gone into an office and you've introduced us, and there's such little controversy when it comes to the rural health issues, the basic tenet of supporting rural health that we see when we go there. Andrew, with that recent election, what's important for us to understand, and tell us a little bit about what we can expect in the lame duck session?
Yeah, no, well, last Tuesday we had, I think, kind of a split decision, right? So I've heard people say that the Democrats won the people and Republicans won the land. In the House, the Democrats ended up taking 38 new seats, taking the majority in the House, which has been in line with off-year elections where the president's party tends to take a pretty good beating. And it's also been in line with kind of what we've seen over the last 2 decades, and that change is kind of the new normal. I think in 8 of the last 10 elections, we've seen either the House, the Senate, or the White House flip, with 2004, 2012 being the 2 outliers in there. And we also saw a huge voter turnout this year. It was the highest percentage of eligible voters voting that we've seen in an election since 1970. At 49%. Wow. So it was a very active voter base this year. And it was interesting that healthcare really drove a lot of the votes in the House, and Democrats can really hang their hat on their success in the House on the healthcare vote. Now, in the Senate, the Republicans sort of held serve, and they picked up 2 seats in the Senate. Kind of making it a split decision, although it should be noted that they had a very favorable map going into the election. A lot of states that Democrats were defending kind of goes back to 2012 and even 2006, where they won states where they typically don't fare as well, states like Indiana and Florida and Missouri, and we saw that change over this election in 2018. So we're going to have a split Congress, and I think, our country just seems to be most comfortable in the way it usually works out is that it's a split Congress. You have either House or Senate controlled by one or the other party, and not both. And that's traditional. And that probably is going to mean less legislation gets done this year in the next Congress. But as far as you asked about what do we expect in the lame duck session, not a whole lot. I think it'll be a rather quiet lame duck session just because we're going to have that changeover in the House. I think you'll see, traditionally this is, if you're, the labor HHS appropriation spending bill, that always comes down to the wire at the very end of Congress. It gets rolled up into a big omnibus bill to fund all the healthcare programs. That's not the case this year. Congress actually passed the labor HHS bill along with the DoD appropriations bill before the end of the fiscal year in September, which was sort of a new concept for us. We're not used to that. So that's done. So you're going to see leadership elections, which are taking place this week. And other than that, you're not going to see a whole lot of major legislation coming out in the next couple weeks. And I think Congress will pack up shop rather earlier. People can get Christmas shopping done, and then you'll see the 116th Congress start in the beginning of next year.
So when do you expect them to go on the holiday break?
They're going to either come back that week. They're going to come back. Well, they came back this week. They'll be in the week after Thanksgiving. They'll be in the first week of December, maybe that second week of December, December 10th. But after, I think December 13th, 14th would be a drop dead date. Got it.
Great. So what do you see looking forward to that 116th Congress? Specific rural health legislation, policy decisions. You talked about how, change is going to be the new normal, and with the split party in Congress, what's going to be challenging for us? What do you see coming up? Get out your crystal ball for us, Andrew.
I mean, you're going to have, the House, they're going to have kind of a multi-front approach, right? So you'll have your issues where the Democrats will want to rally the base. And, I'm sure you'll see the Medicare for All bill being floated. Obviously, that's never going to be something that passes through the Senate or gets signed into law by the president. But one thing that elections really did, I thought, was take any ACA reforms off the table. Had Republicans controlled the House and picked up seats in the Senate, most importantly for them, I think you would have seen an attempt to go in and roll back many parts, if not all, of the ACA. So that is now off the table, as well as probably changes, any wholesale changes to Medicare or Medicaid. I know Speaker Ryan, that was one of his goals, and would have remained a Republican goal had they maintained the House. But that you're probably going to see that go by the wayside too. So I think Democrats will have sort of their rally the base issues. So gun control, voting rights, Medicare for all, obviously ethics reform. You're going to see, but those at the end of the day, they'll get airtime, they'll get past the House, and it'll probably die there. You'll see efforts they make to kind of stop the Trump administration. So you'll see a lot of oversight. I think that's going to be the theme of the next Congress. You're going to see efforts to very much enhance, and it will save the ACA, but probably enhance the ACA. And you'll probably see some work on trying to undo the tax cuts. And then as far as actually what can get done, everyone says infrastructure is the big one that's going to get done. Now, from a healthcare perspective, probably the two big areas are pricing transparency for providers and drug pricing reform. You may see something in the healthcare space. As far as rural health goes, one of the efforts that we've really made a big push on this year has been the State Office of Rural Health Reauthorization Act. And this would be Congress reauthorizing the SOAR program for the first time since inception in the early 90s. Our bills in the Senate actually got through the Senate, got passed by the Senate unanimously. That's S-2278. And right now it's over in the House, and I kind of didn't talk about this in the lame duck, but it is something that we're really pushing and hoping to get through, and that is our SOAR reauthorization bill, and that's H.R. 5641. We've been assured that if there is a public health markup in the Energy and Commerce Committee, and that's where the bill resides, that our SOAR bill will be included in that. Now, if Congress does not get to it this year, obviously when you have a changeover in the House, you have a lot of people lose jobs, unfortunately, in the committees, because committee staff gets trimmed if you go from the majority to the minority. So maybe they don't address public health in the lame duck. And if they don't, that would be an issue that we'd want to work hard in the beginning of the next Congress and get back in there and educate folks on this bill and on the importance of this bill. So that's at least one area where I definitely see Congress going next Congress, early next Congress.
Yeah, I think what when we've done our Hill visits and when we've talked to members of the Hill, it's such a great moment when they say, yeah, this is a no-brainer, in terms of moving that forward. And the State Office of Rural Health Authorization just ensures that, there's infrastructure in place, focal point for rural health and for rural health collaboration, for technical assistance, for information dissemination. We see state offices of rural health around the country serving about 80,000 technical assistance clients, and we know that there aren't enough resources to go out to rural, but we see the state offices of anchors of information and support for rural providers. So we really need that support from all of our rural advocates, and you certainly help us a lot with that. So I'm curious too, Andrew, if I can follow up on one or two of those points. You talked about ethics reform and gun control and enhancing the ACA. Are there any rural health pieces to those, maybe, big picture trends that we might message about related to rural health that you think, in addition to the work on HR 5641 and the Authorization of State Office Program, something on pricing comparison and pharmaceuticals, those kinds of things, something that is particularly that you might call out about rural?
Yeah, I mean, I think opioid reform, we've seen that go through. That's going to be, we saw a big bipartisan deal in 2018, so Congress will continue to have oversight in that area. Next Congress, the Children's Health Insurance Program, we saw that go through, continue to be a big area next year. There'll be a rural tax extenders bill next year. It's going to be another area, but we'll continue to see, with the new appropriations bill, we've seen expanded funding, and that's going to be another area we're going to work to increase funding. And I think both the House and Senate have been very kind to rural health, increasing funding over the last couple of years, and hopefully we'll continue to see that trend next Congress as well.
Especially for critical access hospitals and others, and that doesn't make up for some of the cuts that they've taken. So we have to keep focusing and moving forward on that with the power of rural people working together. I'll move on, Andrew. That our Power of Rural pledge that we ask everyone to take, and we'll talk more about it as we're closing the session, calls rural advocates to communicate, to educate, to innovate, to collaborate. And could you talk about your thoughts on those principles and the fact that we typically focus on the positive for National Rural Health Day and the Power of Rural, and how that is or isn't relevant for today's policy environment?
Yeah, I think it's very relevant. I mean, I think ultimately when you go up to the Hill, when you talk to legislators, when you talk to their staff about your organization, you need to be yourself. If you can't be yourself, people see through it, and they're not going to like it. So we've never taken a fire and brimstone approach, and we've taken a very positive outlook, and I think members appreciate that. And I think that's very important heading into the next Congress, where you're going to see close to a record number of new members. 21% of the House class are freshman members that have never been in Congress before, and it's not just Democrats, it's Republicans as well, and that's over 80 new members. And I think it's very important to get in there. The first impression is the lasting impression, and get in there and kind of convey the power of rural and talk about the importance of rural health care and what our organizations can do for their rural constituents. And I think taking that positive message has been an effective strategy, and I think it will continue to be very well received by members.
Great. I'm going to take a little time out and pause for a bit of chat if you all have any questions or things that you want to ask Andrew about, or issues you want to raise relevant to rural health. Beth, if you would unmute the lines for a moment. And as you're doing that, if you don't have something to add, we ask that you mute your line so that we don't get background noise of all the celebrating you're doing for National Rural Health Day. We'll unmute your lines for just a minute. We are very interested. Thank you. We are very interested to hear about the issues that are of concern to you. I don't see much from you all in the chat box, but I'd open the line. Anybody want to chime in about what's important and their focus on rural health issues and want to shout out about today on National Rural Health Day with our state offices of rural health?
It went really well. Oh, that's the wrong thing.
Okay. Beth, you can mute the lines again. Andrew, I think one of the things that you brought out is that the importance of reaching out to new members. I think that we all have to keep in mind that especially freshmen, congressional and Senate leaders go into these jobs maybe not with a rural health background at all. So what I've seen be so powerful for state offices of rural health and for our partners in this work is to come in with the stories from home, right? Did you know this is happening in this town at this critical access hospital, with a simple fact sheet about what is rural health in their particular state, with actually the phone number, just saying if you have any questions about this as they're getting into understanding rural health issues and empowering them to really understand the rural health issues in their state and the impact on the policies that they consider. So I love to see all of our rural stakeholders, our state offices of rural health and their partner go to the Hill together. We love the work that the National Rural Health Association does with their Policy Institute. And but one of the things that I think is so hard for us in this day and age is keeping up with everything that's going on in the Hill. What ideas or thoughts do you have for us as you think about the coming Congress and the next couple of years? What's the best way to keep up? Did we mute Andrew, maybe?
Do you hear me?
Yep, there you go. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah.
Sorry about that.
No problem. You know, I think as far as best ways to keep up with what's going on in the Hill, a shameless plug for the NOSORH branch newsletter, where we put out a summary every month of what's going on rural health related and what's important to NOSORH and rural health care. Short of that, you know, I think, you know, one way is follow members on Twitter, Instagram. That you follow your members. They're usually a very good source of information of what they're voting on. They generally get put out there the weekly kind of agenda for the Hill and what's important to them. So staying in touch with them that way. I think if you ever go to the Hill, obviously, and you meet with members and staff, it's a great way to kind of get their emails and follow up with them and send them timely and relevant information on your organization. I've found that, listen, staff, Hill staffers are going to get a lot of inundated with information, but if you can stay on their radar and front and center, they never mind getting too much information. So always, you know, be in contact with them and a constant voice there. But no, I think just through social media is now a really good way to stay on. That's the best way I've found to stay on top of things of what's going on in the Hill.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And, you know, it can be a two-way street, right? It's not just following them, but also informing them and making sure that they're following you back. I've seen that experience of, you know, really information on programs and accomplishments and needs be really meaningfully conveyed in Twitter with, you know, links to resources. And I do believe that health LAs and their members keep tabs on what's happening in their state that way, and that's, you know, it's really the best way to get news anymore. And certainly we hope that the Power of Rural and National Rural Health Day helps with that. So folks, if you have any chat or anything to add, please do so. Beth, would you flip to the next slide and we'll talk about resources and what we can share with people going forward. So we know at the National Organization of State Offices of Rural Health, we're focused very strongly on the needs of state offices of rural health and their partners. We do that very much in a close relationship with Andrew and our friends at Hall Render, but also with our partners at the National Rural Health Association. They are a large organization, strongly based with critical access hospitals, a broad constituency in rural health clinics, and also Frontier, and great expertise there to be shared. So if you're not looking at the resources of the National Rural Health Association and their grassroots advocacy calls, their constituency groups, I've already mentioned their Policy Institute. We hope that we want to shout out about the good work that they do for us and for you. So please check out the National Rural Health Association. As Andrew said, we do have a great article on policy work from Hall Renger every month in our branch newsletter. It's comprehensive. It's not, it follows everything from 340B to all kinds of trends emerging legislation. It's very thoughtful and well put together for us, and you can count on it around the first week of every month. And I really found those newsletter articles to help me understand a bigger picture about the work in rural health. We certainly hope that you recognize and have a connection with your state offices of rural health. They are key conveners. They are well informed about policy issues, not just at the national level, but at the state level. As you're reaching out to them, if we can provide more resources to help them with your concerns or your questions about policy, please don't hesitate to let us know. We have a great committee that's led by Lisa Davis in the Pennsylvania State Office of Rural Health and Scott Daniels in the Hawaii Office of Rural Health, and we touch issues from across the nation. We also try to look for emerging regulatory issues so we can keep state offices of rural health and you informed about that work. There are also state rural health associations that are closely affiliated with the National Rural Health Association. There's not one in every state, and just like state offices of rural health, they're all unique. They all have different capacity, but they are tuned into policy and closely connected with NRHA and hopefully with their state office of rural health, and are working to support policy and framing issues, particularly within your state. They're typically multi-sector. They're not just going to be hospitals and clinics. There'll be other members of state rural health associations who care about that work. And then certainly we think our secret weapon is Andrew, and we're going to be working with Hall Renger and Andrew to roll out some additional training for communities to network together to understand how they can frame issues that are important to them about rural health, hopefully inform our work, and for you to have an understanding of the ease at which you can show off your community, engage legislators for site visits, engage them in a conversation about what's key to your community. So watch for that from Hall Renger and from NOSORH as we're looking to the future and the upcoming next session of Congress. And as we're wrapping up, the next slide, please, Beth, we want to talk to you very quickly about the Pledge to Partner, which is all about the power of rural. This is the best way for you to keep in touch with us and what we're doing for National Rural Health Day and what we're doing to share the story of what's happening in rural health and giving it a positive message. So we hope that you will help us grow our work and keep the spotlight on rural health issues by taking the Pledge to Partner. You go to powerofrural.org to do that. You're going to see a survey pop up in just a minute to give us input about this session and give you an opportunity to sign up for more information and tell us what you're interested in. And next slide, please, Beth. I also hope that as you're going throughout your day with National Rural Health Day, that you will really take a look at a beautiful publication that our partners at Impact Communication and our state offices of rural health that have put together some beautiful, inspiring stories about the people who choose to live and work in rural America and who really are stars of collaboration and innovation. We love spotlighting that work. The stories are inspiring. We hope that you'll join us on Twitter chats and webinars later today. You can check the schedule again at thepowerofrural.org, and we hope that you have a lovely National Rural Health Day. Thank you,
hey,
Andrew, for your work. Yep.
Carol, there were a couple of questions that Beth was trying to get in.
Oh, I didn't see them. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's okay. They went to the host. I think she has a couple for you.
Okay, Andrew, if you don't mind hanging a little bit past the half hour, we'd love that. Go ahead. I'm not seeing them still.
Beth, if she can read them, that'd be great.
Thank you, Beth. You might be muted. Darn. Okay. Matt, can you help me there?
Well, they got sent to the host, so I don't know what the questions are. She just said that there were like a couple,
Well,
but
unmute the lines. Let's unmute the lines and see if we can catch them. Thank you. Someone have a question or discussion item for Andrew or for the rest of us?
I think something might have happened on Beth's end.
I apologize. Please send a note and we'd be happy to send that back out to Andrew and to the group. You can put that in your SurveyMonkey. I apologize for whatever that technical glitch is. You all have a very happy National Rural Health Day.